Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome. Whoops, I need to record. Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the Heart of Innovation, where today we're going to be discussing a medical breakthrough that could truly transform treatment for peripheral artery disease, PAD. It's that poor circulation in mainly the legs that when it reaches advanced stages, known as critical limb ischemia or CLI or CLTI, critical limb threatening ischemia, it could be limb threatening. You might remember the viral video where Coach Prime Deion Sanders revealed his vascular surgeon believed amputation was inevitable for him because while they could open these small arteries that were blocked, that were below his knee, those vessels would just simply close up again, right? Now, he was never diagnosed with PAD, but there's a similar treatment for hypercoagulability, meaning blood clots, and he had a lot of blood clots below his knee in those arteries. And the doctors were hesitant to treat him. But thanks to public pressure from the physician's peers across the country, his doctors did, in fact, proceed with treatment anyway, giving him the best chance to keep both of his legs. But most patients are just not so fortunate. Many doctors will not even attempt to treat small arteries below the knee, not because they can't, but because they believe these interventions just delay the quote inevitable unquote, which is amputation, through an expensive revolving door of treatments. But today, we are focusing on Reflow Medical's groundbreaking development, which could change the game for these patients. A temporary stent system that can be completely removed after opening blocked arteries below the knee. This FDA-cleared technology represents a new approach for treating patients with critical limb ischemia. Now, you might be wondering, how can it be that a stent is removable? Is it truly effective? What about long-term results? Now, before I introduce my co-host, Dr. John Phillips, who did have the honor of being the very first physician in the entire state of Ohio to use this device since its clearance, I really think it's important to note that Reflow Medical is a sponsor of our show. But as an Emmy Award winning journalist, I would never accept a sponsorship from a company if I did not believe in their mission. Covering their technology is not part of the sponsorship. In fact, they prefer to remain in the background. This decision to feature their FDA clearance is made with complete journalistic integrity. And because I truly believe, as the FDA did in granting their de novo clearance, that this technology truly represents a significant advancement for patients with PAD. Now, with all that being said, let's welcome Dr. Phillips before we bring in our special guest of the day, Dr. Jay Matthews, who is the lead investigator for the trial that led to this innovative approach that just got clearance that's giving new hope to patients struggling with PAD. Welcome, Dr. Phillips. It's been so long since I've talked to you.
I know, Kimberly. We see each other like what, twice a year, and I was able to touch base with you in person, actually at a Reflow symposium at NCVH last week. So welcome, and you know, I am not an Emmy award-winning journalist. I hope to be one, maybe, and who knows? But I will tell you this: today, and we'll get into the case and all that good stuff, but it became clear to me that there was the possibility that we did not have all our ducks in a row, I's dotted and T's crossed regarding the device that we were going to use. And in that instance, will there be reimbursement to the company from my health system? And Ohio Health, they did a great job trying to get us what's called a purchase order to make this work in the business transaction. That is medicine sometimes. But I will say this, the team at Reflow, when I asked them, I said, listen, guys, I don't know if we'll be able to get this, get you guys paid for paid for this device. And Gunter said, we're not into products, we're into patients. And so we will eat the cost if we have to. And again, you mentioned it. I believe in their mission. And we and Jay can attest to this as well. We try a lot of devices because I think that's how you advance any field. And we give them, I hope, honest feedback. And I feel, at least with this first case, that I've got pretty good feedback to give that's positive. And I just thank Reflow and their team for supporting our mission. and supporting the mission of treating patients and not products. So, with that said, looking forward to the conversation. Jay's got a lot of experience with the device. And we're just going to maybe dive into a little bit of the protocol, research a little bit behind it, what it looks like now, how we roll it out, all that good stuff. So we're going to have a fantastic show.
And I love that you mentioned at their core with this particular company that they are about patients versus products, because when they started this sponsorship, one of our major educational opportunities that they have helped me with throughout the past year has been with the Walking is Medicine initiative to educate patients on the importance of walking. Walking is the best medicine for PAD, and that you need to walk to try and grow your collateral vessels, those extra arteries that reroute blood flow around the blockages. Now, only at that point where you have tried walking and you can't seem to get a break, you get a wound on your foot that's not healing, you have Charlie horses that wake you up at night, and the only way you get relief is you dangle your legs over the side of the bed or start pacing. That's when you get a procedure, but that's only the beginning. Then you got to walk to maintain it. So it is all about walking, and Reflow Medical is all about the patients and promoting that. So I'm
Yeah.
excited
And
to get
that
into
that that
this
little
device.
patients before products thing, that's me and Gunter. So the alliteration is there. The P's are good. So we're always trying to look for a hook. Uh, so we may have another hook there. So because there's another little hook that I'll share with you that Gunter came up with too.
Gunter
So
is the senior vice president, right?
yes, I'm sorry. Yes,
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 of Reflow Medical.
yes, yes, he is. Enough of
Just
that.
making sure. I mean, we're
You're
all
right.
friends here. We're all talking. It's great. We're just welcoming everyone into the conversation. But before we continue this conversation, we got to bring in Jay Matthews. So let's start with a moment of inspiration.
So I'm going to use a quote from Rabbi Nachman. I'm probably not pronouncing his last name right, but I've heard this several occasions, and I think it's poignant when you are potentially using new equipment or just kind of, they say fortune favors the brave, and not like we were splitting the atom here, but again, you're using something a little bit new. And I love this quote, but he's quoted as saying, the entire world is a narrow bridge. And I think the essence of that is that you could misstep anytime and fall and plummet to your death. Therefore, the essence of life is to really have no fear, not be afraid, and trust that there is a reason why you're doing what you're doing. And I honestly felt like today there was a reason why all these kind of stars align, that we were able to kind of get this case done, have a good result. And at the end, ultimately, you're here for the patient. You want to do what's right for the patient and treat the patient and save the piggies. I think we were able to achieve that. But I've been telling some other listeners that I hopefully are hopefully listening that the entire world is a narrow bridge. So have no fear.
I love that quote, and I'm curious with Jay. We have just a couple of minutes before the break for you in. What are your thoughts on that quote and how it applies to you being the PI for this breakthrough study, for this breakthrough device?
Well, I mean, it was a real honor to obviously be able to participate with this and a number of other technologies. Obviously, it's always we're always trying to push the envelope and try to do the best for our patients and try to seek out better solutions and better ways or better mousetraps to solve a really complicated problem that is PAD. So, it's just amazing that we have this opportunity in this day and age to have access to this. There are a lot of places around the world that are not so fortunate, and I really look forward to continue to push the envelope.
Coming up next, right here on the Heart of Innovation, we're going to get into the core of this technology, the SPUR technology by Reflow Medical, and we're going to talk about why it truly matters and why it may be the biggest breakthrough for patients who have PAD, who also have diabetes and chronic kidney disease. So stay with us. You don't want to miss a moment. Don't go away. You're listening to KDOW. Okay, so those who are watching right now online, we are doing a pre-record for our radio broadcast, which airs every Saturday on KDOW, 12:20 a.m. And you can always listen there as well. But go ahead, we are going to start into um, part two. And we have about 6 to 7 minutes in this particular segment. And so what do you say, Dr. Phillips? Should we get into what this technology is, or should we talk about the problem first? Whichever one.
I think let's talk about the technology. I think we can, weave our way
Okay.
into the problem.
Yep.
Because Jay and I will, it's it's funny because I hear Jay's voice and it reminds me of residency at Wash here because he was a couple years older than me, right? Not too much. And so
I think just 1 year, I think.
just one year. I mean, but like
I got more gray hair though.
we were both moonlighting like no one's business because
Right.
and so yes, so it's funny because it gives me a little chill because I think about moonlighting at the on the oncology service over there.
Right.
But yeah, let's get into the technology. I think that's important.
Yep. And remember, we have patients that are listening, never don't understand any of it. So be descriptive.
Sounds good. You ready?
All set.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Dr. Jay Matthews, a good friend who I've known for quite a while. We were residents together. And so, Jay, let's talk about the technology. If I understood it correctly, the co-founder of the company, Reflow Medical, about 10 or so years ago, was at a conference and he had an idea based on looking at his wife's hairbrush of a device that could potentially kind of poke like little holes in the vessel and help treat the vessel, open it up, and maybe deliver a little bit of scaffold or structure for a short period of time, and then remove that from the body. 10 years ago, that probably sounded pretty crazy. It still sounds a little goofy today. But tell me how you got involved with the company and the device, and what got you excited about being involved with their trial.
Yeah, so I've had the pleasure of being involved with these guys pretty much since their inception back in the days when they were just a crossing catheter company. So little tubes that we used to push through chronic blockages. And, I helped them kind of guide some of the development of some of those catheters. And then that's when they kind of proposed this idea, which thought was pretty wacky at the time. This idea that we would put a stent in, but actually take it out. This term retrievable stent technology, there's no such thing that existed in the vascular space. They've done some things like this too for folks in the urology space, for kidney stones and things like that too. But this was very unique in design and very different, and didn't make a lot of sense at the time. But over the countless years of testing and in early work in the lab and whatnot too before we even got into humans, really kind of started to understand what was actually happening. And really also we took this technology, and before it even came to the United States, it was being used in Europe for quite some time, and really excited in terms of like the results that we were getting over there, and then what's possible for the future as well.
Can we talk about what a removable stent really is? What does that look like? And
Yeah.
how does it maintain the same value of a regular stent that is left in over time?
So maybe we should like talk a little bit too about like what's available. So a stent is just it's a mesh tube, and the type of stents that we use have what's called memory metal in it, or essentially, once it heats up in the body, it actually takes a shape that it wants to expand out fully. In this particular case, because it's retrievable, we can actually collapse it back down and take it out of the body. But when it comes to dealing with blockages, especially the type of blockages we're talking about are the small arteries below the knee, the ones that are really, really challenging to treat and lead to ulcers and gangrene and other bad things and peripheral arterial disease. We just didn't have a ton of options. For the longest time, we had just balloon therapy. And really that's, the problem with that is the vessels will recoil back down again and collapse. And then, we have also tried durable metallic stents. The problem with those metallic stents is that they're quite stiff, and they don't go away. And so they unfortunately can impact the way the artery moves. You can only use them in certain locations because they're too stiff. And then that we now more recently had the development of a type of stent that melts away. That's a resorbable stent. And that seems pretty cool, but again, has some limited applications. They only have very short lengths. And really, we don't know if it works over a long distance. And now this new concept of a retrievable scaffold or retrievable stent is you put the stent in, and then it assumes the shape of the vessel, fully expands the vessel outwards. It's got little spikes on it as well too, to kind of puncture some of this fibrous tissue that may cause the vessel to collapse otherwise. And then once we feel like the blood has been flowing for a bit, we feel like we've got a good expansion, then we can collapse the balloon down, collapse the stent, and take it out as well too. So it's truly a leave nothing behind strategy.
Yeah, and I think ultimately what we struggle with is these vessels are long. There's a lot of calcium in it. They're tortuous, and so there's a lot of kind of headwind that we're dealing with. And anytime you have a device that can potentially act like a little bit of a scaffold, may help, change what we call the compliance or the memory shape of the vessel long term. And because the goal is to heal these wounds, right? And also leave nothing behind. So these folks typically sometimes you have to, repeat procedures. It's like going to the dentist, right? Sometimes you got to go back in. And anytime you put a stent in, I think that kind of limits some of our ability to kind of treat it at the next time and the next time. So this is a fun technology. We've got about a minute left, and I think at next segment, we'll probably dive into some of the research behind it. But, Jay, from your standpoint, when they kind of said, hey, let's be the national PI, did you buy into it, or were you kind of like, well, we'll see what happens?
No, I had the luxury of being involved with this technology since the inception. So I kind of felt really close to the technology, especially from the early development phase to what was the product that was used within the trial. So it was a no-brainer for me. I mean, I definitely wanted to guide this therapy.
I'm curious before we go to break, just how has it evolved from day one? You must have, from the very first case till now, it's probably a very different product.
Yeah, I mean, from the moment that it was developed to what actually went into patients, just the length of the spikes, the stiffness, the trackability, the coatings used, all these things changed to continue to refine it and improve it before it actually got into humans. So what we're using now is very different than what we started with. And then I'll tell you that in a few years, what we'll have will be even different. It'll be faster, smaller, better. And potentially we're going to be starting a randomized controlled trial with drug coating on it too to improve patency.
And coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, we'll have more with Dr. Jay Matthews and Dr. John Phillips, because we want to hear about their cases and how they've used the products as well as all of the results. So don't go away. Stay with us right here on KDOW, the Heart of Innovation.
Coolio. All right. Next segment is plus 40. Okay.
Yep. So we're fine.
We're good.
We're not.
8
I'm
minutes.
going to take out the other commercials. I want to give you guys as much time as you need.
Okay. I would love to spend 2 or 3 minutes just for our listeners, because again, we've got a lot of folks, in the secular world, so to speak, that don't understand what it takes to bring something to market, the costs, and Jay had alluded to it. And I think that's important to reiterate, because there's a lot of time and effort and money and minds that go into these things, and it's pretty amazing to kind of see that from the beginning to the end. So, and then we can talk about.
And we do have a question that actually just came in. They want some clarification. Becky wants some clarification. She says she doesn't understand. You're saying, so you go ahead, you put in this stent, you expand it, you put in a balloon, the balloon inflates, pushes those spikes in further, right? And then you let it take shape, and then you leave it in there, deflate the balloon, let it sit there, and then bring it down. But she's confused. So what happens then if you remove it? I mean, you end up, isn't it the same problem that you had before, where you still need something in there long term to prevent the recoil?
Sure. Yeah, we can go into that. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the show. Continuing our conversation with Dr. Jay Matthews, as well as Miss Kimberly, Emmy award-winning journalist, and myself, non-Emmy award-winning physician. So Jay, let's continue. Real quick, you mentioned the time. This was 10 years to fruition. I think people don't understand what it takes to get something on the shelves that that physicians can use with FDA approval and clearance. You got an idea, This is 10 years. This is probably millions of dollars. This is lots of person power. Um, and it's an army of people. And I think it's just a testament to the innovation that occurs in this country. I mean, this show is called The Heart of Innovation, and that's what we're about. But I think it's really cool to see something like this come to market because it's completely wacko, in my opinion. But I think it's going to work. It certainly worked for my case, and we did 3 arteries with one device. I mean, it's fantastic. But I mean, just give us a couple of minutes about, how you understood this process and learned from what they did and the amount of effort and work that time that went into this.
Yeah, I mean, so when it comes to devices, and especially this is different than, say, some of the other devices that are on the market that are what we call iterative, or like they're essentially you use another device and you're kind of copying it and you're creating a slightly better mousetrap. The approval process or something like that, it's still very expensive, still takes a lot of time, but it's a lot easier. It's what they call a 510(k) approval process. It's just kind of a technical term, but it's typically quicker to get to market with that too. Maybe you can get to the market after 2, 3 years of development. But then this is something different. This is called de novo. Literally, they're creating a brand new therapy, a whole new space. It's a much more difficult process, and that's I alluded to the fact that this whole process took like 10 years, and so that means you're designing it, you're incepting it, you're playing with it, doing all this stuff, and then we go through all sorts of testing and there is some animal research that's involved as well too. I know there's some ethics behind that, but that's a lot of times that's necessary from the FDA to show that it's going to be safe to use before we even try it in humans. And a lot of times when we do try it in humans, we do what's called a first in human, and that's done oftentimes overseas somewhere, and we get some early experience, and we use that then to do additional safety analysis before we go into an early experience. And many times that early experience is done outside the United States. So before a product ever makes it into the US, it's gone through years of testing, which is required. And then in many situations, if we want to get special approvals, we have to do another trial. We may have already done a trial elsewhere. We do another trial in the United States. And then that information is what's used to guide the approval process or the FDA approval to bring it to the public for commercial use.
And just real quick, it's really important, I think, for our listeners to understand that research and these new clinical devices only occur when we get the buy-in from our patients. They have to trust us that, hey, we want to use this device. You're going to get standard of care. We believe in the device. But none of this stuff happens if patients say, I don't want to be your guinea pig, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's right. I mean, none of this happens without the help of our patients because it's, and whenever we talk to patients about a new therapy, we have to have buy-in too, because obviously there's sometimes risk with these types of things, and we
Right.
discover things along the way that were unanticipated, and that requires a pivot or a change. Or sometimes you have to shut the whole trial down, and
And Dr.
sometimes you have to do what's right.
What was that conversation like today with your patient, your very first patient?
Well, I mean, so again, my patients, and I think Jay's are, most of our patients are not put under general anesthesia. So they are hearing the case. Okay. They get a little bit of twilight, but they're awake. But before the case, we did the procedure. I said, listen, sir, we have an opportunity. This is an FDA approved device, but we're just kind of, getting our feet wet on it. I think if I'm understanding you're testing correctly and the pictures look okay, you'd probably be a pretty good candidate for this. And he was all in. I mean, he was super thankful. I explained it to him and his wife. They were very grateful that we were able to get the case expedited to him. We got, again, a really nice result. And I said, and then at the end, I asked him, we're going to ask for a media release because we want to share this information with their team. And we're all learning, right? Like Jay said, there's iterations. We can tweak how we do the procedure and whatnot. And we're all learning together. And if we can use your case and teach other physicians or members of the Reflow Medical team or any other, in industry, company, yes. And he's like all for it. So, we're gonna share his case, and he was all for it. He was all in.
So what makes this, Dr. Matthews, you said it's de novo, right? It's a brand new therapy, and it's just not a better mousetrap in a sense, which was what a lot of other companies were doing, trying to constantly innovate around treating the Achilles heel of what I consider PAD, which is, it's those long calcified blockages or even, thrombotic blockages below the knee. Um, what is it about this new treatment that makes it so different that all of these doctors that have been resistant to doing anything below the knee and instead just saying, hey, walk, 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 when you can't walk anymore, we'll chop it off? What's going to bring them on board to say, hey, this is the game changer, I'm going to start treating below the knee now?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there are still going to be a lot of naysayers out there and people that aren't 100% on board because we haven't had great durable therapies until recently. And again, we're limited still. And I'm not going to tell you that this device is going to be the end all be all because I do believe that we have other iterations of this device, specifically one with drug that we're going to be investigating that's going to be even better. And what I mean by drug is sometimes we use medications to help prevent the blockages from coming back. But we were really encouraged by the results of the study that we did in terms of their acute outcomes and also some of the later outcomes as well too. That a lot of these patients they healed up afterwards and they had good results as well too. In fact, I just did an angio tonight right before I got on this call. That was a patient from that study completed it, and the area that we had treated with the SPUR was still open a year later. So pretty exciting. Nobody else knows this. I literally just did this, and so I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I think we're looking for something that gives us long-term outcomes. It's certainly better than just simply ballooning, which just doesn't work that well.
And it's interesting too because as cardiologists, we place stents in the coronary arteries, and those stents last for many, many years. And so, we have this mindset that these stents should work everywhere else, but they just don't. And I think it's also a little bit counterintuitive to deploy something that it's like a cage basically that with the little spikes on it. It's like a pipe cleaner, right? But then you just kind of bring it down and move it around and use multiple. You can use it multiple times, which is kind of neat. But it's a foreign concept, and I think part of why we do this show is to just kind of start the conversation about something new, how where we think it applies. And to Jay's point, this is not the silver bullet. I mean, nothing's a silver bullet, but I think this is a different mousetrap, and it's really exciting.
So if people actually develop this stent, right, that's that metal scaffolding for the long term, right? Then why is it that a scaffolding that can be retrieved right away is going to potentially have the same, result long term, like for example in the coronary?
Yeah, so it's interesting. As John was mentioning, we think that, hey, we put a stent in, we're going to get nice long-term results. Well, it turns out that those medicated stents that we put in the heart work pretty well just for a very tiny portion of the below the knee arteries, those tibial arteries. And it seems like if we start putting them anywhere else, like further down, there's a risk of them getting crushed or clotting off. In fact, we studied this in some other trials. It was a study called the Saval trial that they looked at these long medicated stents, and it turns out it didn't work very well. And so we need to do something different, and that's where we realize that sometimes leaving something behind long term may not be a good plan, and that's where this idea of retrievable stent technology came about.
Coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, we'll have more with Dr. Jay Matthews and Dr. John Phillips and their experience with the brand new FDA de novo clearance of the SPUR technology. Stay right here on KDOW in the Heart of Innovation. Don't go away.
What's
Okay.
next? What's next, Kim?
Well, I think that I still kind of want to I don't think we're really answering kind of the question, like, so you have a stent that is retrieved, right? So how does it have that same, in a sense, long term that a regular stent would have as in the coronary if it's retracted? How do you prevent the recoil? Is it preventing? Can you talk a little bit more about how that works?
Sure. All right, ready?
Ready.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So, Jay, in our minds as interventional cardiologists, and I mentioned this before, but we pretty much have cornered the market on how to treat blockages in the heart arteries. We see a blockage, the patient's having symptoms, we put a little balloon in, then we put the metal scaffold stent in. It's got a little drug on it. The body kind of seems to like it there, and the vessel stays open 10 plus years, oftentimes in the legs and particularly below the knee, which is what we struggle with, particularly in patients who have critical limb ischemia or ulcers or significant rest pain due to the blockages. We haven't really cornered that market yet, and like you said, we've tried various things, and I do think that the Esprit bioabsorbable scaffold from Abbott is promising, but you're not going to put that everywhere. So we have to think differently, and the SPUR device is a little bit different. It's this little, we like again, the little cage that kind of looks like a stent, but it's kind of memory shaped metal and it has little spikes on it. So tell me, what do you think the spikes do? Are the spikes kind of like getting into that middle portion of the artery and maybe breaking up some of the fibrotic tissue to let it kind of pop and then relax? And then will that keep the vessel open? Because people are asking, like, well, the stent props the vessel open. How is this little device going to do that? Because you're taking it away. You're just kind of, you cover it up again, right? And it kind of folds down like an umbrella, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a combination of factors. So the the retrievable stent, it has an integrated balloon, and so when you unsheath or expose the stent, it expands outward. Those spikes start to penetrate into that wall, and then the balloon is inflated, and then it pushes those spikes in. And these below the knee vessels, the ones that recoil a lot, have this layer of calcium underneath that soft tissue, but in the wall. It's called medial calcinosis, or there's a lot of different names for it essentially. And that calcium is oftentimes what really makes things difficult for keeping these vessels open, because everything just snaps back shut again. So by essentially puncturing that calcium and creating all these little microfractures, it makes the vessel a lot more pliable and flexible. At least that's what we think. And so those spikes break that fibrous tissue and also break some of that calcium apart. And then that stent cage is able to fully expand. Now, at this point, what we do is we deflate the balloon and we just leave this cage up, and blood is flowing. So that way you can still get blood flowing down below the knee. And you can leave this thing up for as long as you want. But in the trial, the whole process took about 6 minutes or so. So, we would inflate it up for a couple minutes, deflate it for about 3 minutes, and then one blast balloon inflation at the last minute, and then deflate everything and retract it out of the body. Now, in the real world, people probably won't do it for that long, but that's what we did in the study, and that seemed to work really well. And what was interesting was that when we took cameras down afterwards and looked at these vessels, it maintained the shape. So the vessel didn't recoil, which is something that was seen very often, even several minutes after doing other types of procedures. So with this procedure, that recoil didn't seem to happen. The vessel seemed to stay open. And so that's what was really encouraging as well, too, towards, that we could actually do this, leave it up, take it out, and then able to maintain that same shape as if the stent was there, even though it was not.
And the recoil is that's a big problem. I mean, you start seeing that within 15 minutes of just using a standard balloon.
Yeah.
Part of why we place the stents is to prevent the recoil. I can tell you the case that we just did. So we treated all three, the anterior tib, posterior tib, perineal, all three vessels. And so from the time I started the first vessel, which was the posterior tibial, to finishing with the perineal, it was about 40 minutes. And so we had a runoff of all three vessels. And so that posterior tibial artery, 40 minutes after the procedure, looked pretty darn good, honestly. And we used the camera, we looked at it. And I think it's just, it's important to understand the technique as well. And I think, like, as you and I potentially train physicians about or talk about these things, you have to kind of follow. Now, again, is someone going to do 6 minutes worth of ballooning? I don't know. But I mean, I think it's important to kind of follow the recommendations of the device so it works properly. But it worked really well, and I know I was really impressed, because oftentimes when I just do balloon angioplasty, you kind of take that picture and you're like, all right, it looks pretty good, but what's it going to look like in 10 minutes type deal? And so
Exactly.
This was 40 minutes afterwards, you got a nice result.
And so I'm curious, Dr. Matthews, in terms of the study results, you said that you had done quite a few, not necessarily you, but in the trial, there were quite a few cases that were done overseas. Do you have any data that shows the longest that the vessel has stayed open following the use of this?
Yeah, I mean, we have data over 6 months with showing excellent results, and that's typically the major metric for most of these trials. And then, we have also 12-month data that's essentially going to be forthcoming as well. And then our own 6-month data from this trial, will be fully released very shortly. Now, what we do know from this study that out at 6 months, there was a high freedom from bad events. So essentially, the vessels primarily did tend to stay open. There weren't a lot of cases where people had to go back and do a lot of additional interventions. So really favorable results for a non-drug device, which is pretty exciting. But it's interesting. If you look in Europe, when this device was combined with some of the medicated balloons, the results were even more impressive. So, we're talking incredible patency rates in terms of the vessel stayed open for long term. And that's what really kind of pushed us to create the drug version, which will be forthcoming. Hopefully later this year, we're going to be starting that trial. And I'm the global PI along with Dr. Mahmoud Razavi for that study. And I think we're really excited because that's going to be, the next generation of this technology, the natural iteration.
And the theory behind that is, you're kind of poking holes in the skin, so to speak, much like you would do for a fruit of some sort to elucidate the juices. So you've got the holes, so now you can get the drug that kind of works its way in. So that's
Yeah.
pretty exciting. I think that'll be that. We're looking forward to helping out in that as well. But Jay, the 6 month mark, because people will ask the doctors and physicians that are listening in, you know, do you think we need longer term data, or is it just, hey, the wound healed, we're good to go? We talk about durability. Does it matter if the vessel's open in anything, whether it's a stent or this or something? Does it matter if the vessel's open at a year mark?
So it's a
I
controversial
gotcha.
thing, right? So it depends on who you talk to, right? So what's the primary goal of these types of interventions? Is it to maintain patency, which is a nice thing, or is it to try to heal wounds? And the reason why we have this mindset that we want to just heal wounds is because we've never had anything that's given us really long-term data until relatively recently, where I think Esprit had some pretty nice year-long results in comparison to some of the other things that we've done before too with ballooning. So I think the 1 year mark is going to become in the future the kind of the standard for at least when it comes to patency, but it may not really matter when it comes to trying to heal wounds. We want to get enough blood flow so that the wounds heal, the patient still can be saved from amputation. If you have patency, it certainly is a nice number to look at and to talk about. But if you have a patent vessel but an amputated, a partial amputation, well, then were we that successful? I mean, perhaps, but ultimately the goal is to try to save as much a limb as possible.
And that speaks to the fact that it takes a village to take care of these folks. I mean, you and I are plumbers to some degree. I don't do wound care. I don't think you do either. But I mean, like we work closely with wound care folks, and so it's just a collaborative effort to. At the end of the day, you got to take care of the patients, and like we said earlier, it's patients over product.
And what we at the Global PAD Association always say that these procedures are basically used to heal a wound and to give you enough pain relief so that you can get out and walk to grow those collateral vessels so that you may never need another procedure again. Get those collateral vessels rocking. Well, coming up here on the Heart of Innovation, we'll have more with Dr. Matthews and Dr. Phillips talking about the SPUR technology. And guess what? Next step, could it be the heart? Stay with us to find out. Don't go away. Good teaser, good teaser.
Good teaser, yeah. Little
Um, this is the one I like. This one I think will help paint the picture for people as to why like this retractable stent is really amazing because you can maintain that vessel open, pump up the balloon quickly, bring it down, but you can still maintain, which has not been able to be done before, which could be a game changer for the heart as well. And they did their first case in New Zealand on that.
So is this our last section, right?
This is our last section, but wondered if you both could stay after for 5 minutes and you both
Sure.
do a quick spur of innovation powwow.
Done.
Cool.
So you want to get into the corner, Jay? You want to get into the
Sure.
coronary real quick?
Talk
And
about that too,
I
yeah.
think it's for ISR, right?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yep.
3, 2, 1. For those of you who like baseball, we are rounding third on the show, and hopefully we'll slide into home and win the game. And I think we won the game today. At least I feel like I did with the procedure today using the SPUR technology. But Jay, so it sounds like may not just be limited to the smaller vessels below the knee. Looks like there's an application potentially within the heart as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So as we were developing this product for below the knee, made sense. This is a small device. Can we shrink it down even further and potentially put it in coronary arteries? And the idea here is that we were talking about stents earlier, and stents seem to do a good job to keep blood vessels open in the heart, but they're great until they're not. In which case, sometimes you have layers of metal in the heart, and you have a patient that develops another blockage. Well, what do you do? And we've been limited until very recently with some drug-coated balloon technology. The problem is getting that drug where it needs to go. And as we were talking earlier, maybe these spikes can penetrate into the wall, allow drug to actually get to where it needs to be, and can that potentially improve outcomes? So this same SPUR device has been developed for use inside stents, inside of the coronary arteries, and so that presents an exciting iteration of this technology.
That is exciting. And in the last few moments here, I just wanted to get both your feedback, tell people like what is it actually like to use this device that is so different for you than anything else out there that you're most excited about?
Well, I'll start there too. I mean, just for me, it's just exciting to be involved with something new and something different, because like I said, what we've had before has been the same technology that's been available since the 1990s. So the fact is that we got something that's completely different and new, paradigm shifting, is really exciting. So to me, I'm just super stoked to be there and be involved with this.
Fantastic. And I'm just going to unmute our friend Dr. Phillips that muted himself so that he can give his last thoughts.
Kim, you are you control the reins on. So I actually hit the mute button, and you control whether or not I can talk, which is probably a good thing. I think it's fantastic to have something new. I was really excited after this case because it's not often where there's a completely, as Jay said, a de novo device that we're really, I think we were the seventh in the country to use it in the FDA approval, post FDA approval. So I think again, an added tool to the toolbox, much needed. Looking forward to what it can do in the future, and then particularly in the coronaries as well.
If you both could wave your wands to do anything different in it based on your experiences, what would it be?
Me personally, these are long lesions, and it's actually kind of neat too because now you're getting a little bit into the nitty gritty of it. But so the spikes and the stent itself are what we call sheaths. So there's a covering on it, and so you have to pull that covering off. And typically, you have to take the entire covering off and expose the whole portion of the length of the stent. And actually, the way they designed it, you can unsheath portions of it. And I think one of our friends at Reflow, dial a length, DAL. That's the kind of the term he coined. So you can unsheath part of it and deploy it, and it works. So in a section, it doesn't damage the covering. So that's kind of cool too. So I think the longer lengths and that technology is fantastic.
And Dr. Matthews, 10 seconds. What do you think? Looking forward to the drug-coated
Yeah,
iteration.
drug coated, but then not just that though. There's sky's the limit. Bigger vessels, veins, dialysis patients. There's so many different applications. So super excited as to see what we can do. This is just the beginning.
And on that note, thanks everyone for joining us. We really appreciate you. Amazing new technology, the SPUR from Reflow Medical. Okay, well, we're gonna chop that up. That was a perfect way to end. We'll probably just end on you when we go to the radio show. But let's give it 4 to 5 minutes really quick. We'll remain live here. So those who
Okay.
are still interested in, we have a Spur of Innovation segment. that we do that just is a quick wrap up of a particular new technology, nuts and bolts, pros, cons, what's next. I would like you, I really am excited about what you just said about the next iterations, because I think that they could be serious game changers for some of those other things as well I never thought of. So, Dr. J, do you want me to start out or do you want to just do it with Jay?
I think this is an attempt or should be focused more on the technical aspect of it for the physicians listening, if that's okay. And
It's all yours.
so let's do that. So we've got 4 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. So Jay, the spur of the moment here, and really the pun is intended because I just did my first spur case, and like going over some of the technical issues here. So the device itself can be kind of exposed and inflated for the time period that is recommended 4 times. And I think that's kind of unique because you can move to different vessels within the parameters of the sizing, right? I think, there's two different sizes. From your experience with the trial, and there's the trial and then there's real world because those blockages and the lengths are usually longer in the real world. One of the questions so I'll tell you what I did. So I did not pre-dilate one of the blockages. And I used IVUS and there was more calcium than I thought, but it went through. So it's a little bit bulkier. So tell me, I think pre-dilation probably makes sense in most of these, but
Right.
just what are your thoughts on pre-dilatation before
Yeah,
deploying
I mean,
this?
we've talked about that. That's actually in the IFU. The FDA required that we say that you're supposed to pre-dilate first before bringing the device down. And I think in most scenarios, you might pre-dilate with a balloon that's smaller than the size of the vessel just
Yep.
to be able to
Okay.
deliver the device down, get it into place. Obviously, could you potentially do it without if the vessel is, adequately sized, has enough lumen, I guess, then I suppose you can do it. But the reality is, within the specifics of the IFU, they want you to pre-dilate, and that's probably what I'm going to do. That's what we did in the trial. It just makes it just adds a couple extra seconds, really, and you're not doing a prolonged inflation, just enough to accommodate bringing this device down. I'll tell you that the next generation of this device will be smaller than what we have currently, because what we have right now is a 6 French system, and the hope is that we'll eventually be able to come with longer links and even a 5 French system as well.
Yeah, because I think the rate limiting step is going to be delivering it. Once you deliver it, you can kind of, do what you need to do. But again, that one lesion, we looked at it and the team was there and I said, let's try it without pre-dilating. And it went through. I mean, I used a specs catheter to kind of it was an 018 over an 014 wire and I felt, oh, I'll daughter it, but it worked. And then the other comment that I want to make, and I thought this was pretty curious, the notion of the partial deployment, the fact that they designed the sheath to be resistant to the tines, so you can inflate the balloon and the tines won't break the sheath. That's kind of nice. I mean, like
Yeah.
that's a dial a length, so to speak, the Gunter's point, and that's attractive to me because we ballooned across the perineal into the TP trunk, and I didn't really want to get involved too much in the TP trunk, and I didn't have to because I was able to land it, and I thought that was pretty sweet. I'm not gonna lie.
And you know what? It's going to be interesting to see if in the future the sizes that people are most interested in are the long ones, because like you said, just dial a length. You use one device and it kind of takes care of a lot of different lengths. And the other thing too, I'll say about from your earlier comment is that the outer coating is extremely slick. So even though it's 6 French, I never had a problem delivering this thing within the trial. And we did a ton of cases and it tracked really well, which is why, to your point, you're able to send the thing down even without pre-dilating. It actually worked very well. But, you know, that's how we did it in the study. That's how the approval was. So that's why we make that recommendation.
Yeah, we went antegrade today, and I used the Halo sheath, which is kind of a 5.6, and so obviously the body sees 5 French, but the devices can see 6, and that worked well. What are your thoughts on for the physicians listening out there that want to get their hands on this, adhering to the 2-3-1, 2 minutes of balloon, 3 minutes of kind of in the wall, and 1 minute of post balloon? Like, do you think we should change that? Or I have my opinion, but I want to hear yours.
So a couple things about that. One, I did change it for the protocol for the next trial. So within the drug trial, we're going to be going shorter to see if that works. So it'll probably be a 3-minute process rather than a 6-minute process, because that may be more reflective of what actually happens in the real world. That being said, one of the reasons why the Saval trial, which was a trial involving very long drug-eluting stents or drug-coated stents within the below-the-knee vessels, um, the issue there was that the PTA arm that was compared against did really well. And why was that? Well, it's because prolonged balloon inflation had really decent results. Actually, they had some of the best-in-class angioplasty results seen in
I
any
know they
trial.
did.
But
It's
that's
crazy.
because we had
Yeah,
to
exactly.
leave these things up for almost 6 minutes.
Right.
So that's where
Right.
some of that 6-minute number came from, is because we also wanted to maximize the results of angioplasty as well. So, some of the way this thing works is through plastiking the wall, right? We're putting the spikes in, we're putting the scaffold in. It's creating a very controlled form of angioplasty, and then we're taking everything out. So didn't want to
I mean,
really,
right.
didn't
No, I
want
was
to.
just gonna say I can tell you like yeah, I IVUS pre-info. So the first lesion that we did not pre-dilate, we IVUSed it, and then we IVUSed afterwards. No dissections. I did see some spasm. There's spasm distal to it, and so that's something to be aware of. But to your point, I think we owe it probably to the field to say maybe it doesn't take 6 minutes. Let's try 3 or 4, whatever it is. I mean, I think that makes sense, frankly.
Well, that's what we're going to try to find out. We're obviously going to try to push the envelope a little bit too in the next trial, but I think there'll be some real world clinical experience as well too that we'll see. We want to track these outcomes, so we don't know, right? But that's where the 6 minutes came from, was from what happened in Saval.
Do you think the company needs to, when they are telling their clinicals about this and sharing what we're learning, when they go to a new account, do you think they need to adhere to the trial and do the 6 minutes?
Well, I mean, that's what they're going to recommend.
Yeah,
I think the physicians will kind of do what they're going to do.
exactly.
I can tell you, within the study, I did have a patient that I had to do 4 inflations, and that's a long time, right?
Yeah.
It was a long link lesion, so it's
Yep.
a lot of watching paint dry.
No, it is. I mean, that's why we did 4 of them. It was 40 minutes. And actually the first balloon ruptured in the calcium.
Hmm.
So IBIS is huge because you saw calcium, but you didn't appreciate it. And you talked about that medial calcification. It's circumferential, 360 degrees. I mean, it's there. And I think IBIS is a really important adjunctive
You mean
therapy.
the pre-balloon rupture, but not the spur balloon, right?
No, the spur ruptured.
Oh, the spur
Yeah.
balloon. Wow,
Well, because
I don't think I ever saw that in the trial.
I didn't pre-dilate it, and it was funny because Gunter's we're all sitting there like this thing will not hold pressure here. What did I do? And we weren't getting blood back.
Yeah.
And then I brought it out, and yeah, there was a little pinhole rupture from
Wow,
it. But
that's I don't
we
think I've seen
didn't
that.
pre-dilate, so
Ah,
because
okay.
this is this is definitive treatment, right? This is
Yeah,
definitive treatment in your mind.
yeah. So actually, that's a good argument as to why you should pre-dilate beforehand, right?
Yeah, I think you got a little stalactite that just
Yeah,
was causing grief.
yeah, exactly.
Kim, what do you think? How we doing here?
I think that would be absolutely, I think that's amazing. You guys can do closing thoughts. We do have a patient that was asking, I thought it was a really good question in terms of the drug coated version that they're looking at in the next iteration. Is it going to have the same ability to be able to use multiple times with one device,
Mm.
or are you going to have to have a brand new device to actually do multiple sections on the leg?
Yeah, that's going to be the drawback, obviously, too. So once you've deployed the device, so the coating will be on the spurred stent with the spikes as well as the balloon itself. So once you've inflated this thing, it's a one-time use only. So hopefully by the time we have that available, we're going to have the longer links as well. So that's going to be a different scenario than what we've encountered before. The spur that's approved today can be used multiple times, as noted. But yeah, this will be a different situation, and it's a good point. It's going to be a one-time use only for that particular scenario.
Now, I can't remember the company, but I think there's a company that is developing kind of an elution balloon. Typically, what that was done back in the day with the coronaries to maintain perfusion, but you mix up a slurry of something and then and elute the drug. That is an option, I suppose, if you had multiple, if you could use it multiple times because then you just get another syringe full of drug. But you're right, that's a limit, right? I mean, so it's going to be a single lesion, I would imagine, right?
So, I think what we'll see happen is that, we'll have SPUR, and then hopefully uh, there are several companies that have sirolimus-based balloons that hopefully will get approval for use below the knee that could be used in combination with SPUR, just as they were doing in Europe. And then by then we'll have the trial for the drug version, and then we'll see what happens. I mean, I think you'll have multiple options.
Jay, one last question before we wrap things up. How do we prevent, um, I don't think fraud is the right term, but the fact that
Use.
you misuse, right? Because so like today, and I had justification. Okay, I had three separate lesions. They were focal, and I treated three different arteries. But with that is three different billing codes to some degree, and I used one device. How do we how do we talk to physicians about using this device in the right patient for the right reasons?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the key is that this technology, as exciting as it is, sometimes could invite itself towards a certain degree of misuse or abuse. And then we could screw it up for everybody else, like all the other patients. Sometimes, they make these reimbursements financially non-viable for folks to continue to get treated in outpatient settings and other environments. So we have to police ourselves, right? And we have to call out, people who are doing things excessively. I think we've taken a blind eye in many scenarios. So I would hope that people are going to tend to be more vocal. Also, the companies will have to be, watching for this as well too. And we have to really police ourselves so that we can continue to make this stuff available for everyone.
Yeah, I love it. And I think just my closing thoughts. I know Reflow obviously helps sponsor the show, but at their national sales meeting, you can tell like the vibe is a little bit different. And I've always said like you guys have the opportunity to be a truly a CLI company. You can train your staff to help doctors treat this process, this disease process that has a very high morbidity and mortality rate, and you can make a difference. And you have to use your device, great, but let's treat folks. Let's save the piggies. So thanks for joining us, Jay,
Appreciate
Kimberly.
it. Thanks, as always.
Yeah,
Always.
and we have one more question coming in,
Okay.
as from them, and it's actually a really good question because we talk to the patients a lot about why less is more with these procedures, and we tell them that if they can just go with a plain old balloon, great, but they should be aware of the risk factors in any of these procedures, which include distal emboli. And we always tell them that to ask the doctor, what are you doing to mitigate the risk of distal emboli? And so that's what Becky is actually wondering is she's throwing that question right out at me. She wants to know, what is there a potential for distal emboli, things to break off, to go down to your toes and possibly get recirculated back and cause a stroke?
So there should be no risk of stroke because these are arteries that, and the terminal vessels are the little tiny little capillaries of the toes and whatnot too. So there's no opportunity for it to go backwards and go up to the brain. But embolization is always a risk with any type of arterial procedures that we do. The good thing is we didn't see it within the trial, and I think there are other types of procedures that are done, like drilling procedures and things like that too, where I think there's more liberalization of stuff that can go downstream. We just don't really see that with traditional balloon procedures or with something like this with the retrievable stent technology. So I think that's reassuring.
I'll just say, and I think the great thing about having a company that is devoted to learning and iterating the device appropriately, and this is from my tech Alex, he called it out. So when we were doing our fourth kind of like insertion. So similar to what you kind of do to the clot retriever, right? With an ARI, when you unsheath it, shake out get all your clot porn and clean that thing out, and then you resheath it. I think it makes sense to unsheath the device outside the body, rinse it off, because we did get some particulate. Well, it was actually some thrombus, some very microscopic thrombus that you could see. I think that's really important, and that should be recommended. And I know the team took that to heart, and they're going to hopefully tweak that a little bit, because I'm definitely going to be cleaning that guy out before each time we put it back into the body.
So I'll tell you something that within the study, we didn't do that. Like we started most distally. Like so, if you had a long length lesion, for example, you would
Uh-huh.
do the most distal part, and then recapture, then redeploy, recapture, redeploy. It seemed to, but I don't think we were aware of what was on the scaffold itself too. So that's kind of an interesting observation and something that we definitely have to look into more.
Yeah, I think we should, we're gonna unsheath it, clean it off, dip it
Yeah,
in whatever, and recapture it. But we're always learning. That's the beauty of
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Jay. Good. Thanks for joining.